Good afternoon. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam.
Let me start with Allah's name, the merciful benefactor, the merciful redeemer. We bear witness that there is nothing worthy of worship except Allah alone. And we bear witness that Muhammad, to whom the Quran was revealed, is his slave servant and messenger and the seal of the prophets. And we further bear witness that Muhammad is a mercy to all the worlds for those who are looking for good behavior and good character. Ameen. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in to Taqwa Talks. As Imam Tariq mentioned, our discussion today will be on the production One Night in Miami. That program or that film was directed by Regina King, and this was her first time as a director in a film. And it's also based on a screenplay by Kemp Power, who organized a fictional account of the real life meeting between the four icons that we're going to discuss today. Cassius Clay, who became Muhammad Ali, Malcolm X, as you know, who became El Hajj Malik Shabazz, Jim Brown, arguably the greatest football player of all time, and Sam Cooke, who sang incredible songs that we all love and listen to now. I do want to open up with a song, a brief song that I've taken a liking to over the years and set the mood for our discussion.
From the cradle to the grave. I love my people. Couldn't bring us down even when they called us slaves. I love my people. We kept our pride throughout the years. I love my people. Worked hard and prayed and shed some tears. I love my people. No matter what the world has put us through. I love my people. We come out on top in everything we do. I love my people. Won't you say it with me? I love my people. I love my people. Say it again. I love my people. I love my people. Love my people, all the colors of our skin. I love my people. Believe me when I say we was never born in sin. I love my people. I love the way we walk. I love the way we talk. I love the way we sing. I'm blessed because I do one thing. I'm gonna love my people and there is no doubt we're gonna be alright. Is what I'm talking about. Oh, folks say I love my people. I love my people. Somebody say I love my people. I love my people. Find my people all around the world. I love my people. Man and woman, boy and girl. I love my people. Always try to do our best. I love my people. We work hard every day and seldom rest. I love my people. If I could have one wish come true, I love my people. Then you'll love me like I love you. Like I love you. Everybody say, I love my people. I love my people. Say it again. I love my people. I love my people. No matter where you go, there we are. We're not just fans for the shining star. Spread this word from near and far about just how blessed we truly are, y'all. Take these words across the land. Divided we fall, united we stand. A bunch of greatness in your history. Without my people, where would we be? Tell me. I love my people. I love my people. Say it again. I love my people. I love my people. Come on now, y'all.
All right.
Hey, whoever that is.
Miss Denise, you can't see me?
Yes, I can.
All right. How you doing?
All right, we'll be back in a second.
Hi, Rod.
Hello.
Hello.
We're not just players. We're not just players. The shining stars. The shining stars. Spread His word. Spread His word. Both near and far. Both near and far. About just how fast. Just how fast. We truly are. We truly are. Take these words. Take these words. Across the land. Across the land. Divided we fall. Divided we fall. United we stand. United we stand. Think about greatness. Think about greatness. Your history. Your history.
Just think about how blessed we really are. I hope you all enjoyed that as much as I do. So what we'd like to do now is frame the discussion of the movie. The movie focuses on a February 25th, 1964 heavyweight championship bout between Cassius Clay, then 22-year-old young man, and Sonny Liston, who was predicted to destroy Clay. However, Clay wins the fight. So after the fight, the four men that we just talked about were scheduled to return to the Fontainebleau Hotel and have a discussion. At least that was the plan of Malcolm and Muhammad Ali, but Jim Brown and Sam Cooke were looking for a party. And as you know, the Fontainebleau Hotel in Miami was one of the few African-American owned hotels, and that is where they decided to stay, except for Sam. Sam was in a different hotel because he had become quite a success. As I mentioned, Jim and Sam were looking for a party. However, as I mentioned earlier, the movie takes some liberties with their dialogue. Malcolm essentially had a plan to reveal that Muhammad Ali had accepted to become a member of the Nation of Islam. And he was due to reveal that to the other members of the party. However, Malcolm had a second plan as well, because at that time, if you recall the history, Malcolm had made some comments regarding President Kennedy's assassination that caused some friction between him and the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. And as you know, Malcolm was silenced to a great extent after that, and it didn't go over very well between those two leaders. Now, at the hotel, there was a considerable amount of dialogue with the four. However, there was strong dialogue with between two individuals, whether those individuals were Jim Brown and Sam Cooke, or Malcolm and Muhammad Ali, or Jim Brown and Malcolm, etc. And so, as you know, there was some very heavy dialogue, and we're going to save room at the end of the program for discussion so that we can get into some of those discussions that these brothers had. We cannot do justice to this movie in the time allotted. However, let's do the best we can. As I mentioned, I want to talk a little bit about the experiences that each of these individuals had prior to getting into the conversation at the hotel. As you all probably know, Malcolm had been sentenced in 1952 to a 10-year sentence for activities that he was involved in as a young man. And while incarcerated, he was visited by his brothers and his sister, who told him about the Honorable Elijah Muhammad and the Honorable Elijah Muhammad's teaching. And as a result of learning about those teachings, Malcolm was urged to learn to read, and he taught himself very well how to read. And he had a famous book that he took a liking to, and that book, surprisingly, was the dictionary. And as a consequence of learning the dictionary from A to Z, it enhanced what was going to happen to him later in terms of his articulation going forward. Now, once Malcolm was released from prison, he became a minister in the Nation of Islam in Detroit, Michigan. And we can talk more about that during the discussion phase. The movie also opens up, and that part that I just mentioned is not in the movie, but the other characters open up, particularly with Sam Cooke, who was scheduled to a 2-week stint at the Cooke Cabana in New York. And while Sam was due to perform, he was essentially told that he could not use his own band and he had to perform a certain song. He was performing before a predominantly all-white crowd. I would venture to say all-white crowd. And he had received a very cold reception from that crowd. And they eventually walked out on Jim Brown. Jim Brown, born and raised in Georgia, took a trip back to his hometown and visited with a Caucasian person that he knew, and that person knew his family. So if you recall in the movie, when Jim approached the home, he was greeted by this gentleman's grandson. And as he introduced himself, she was very happy to know that it was, in fact, Jim Brown. So she brought her grandfather out. He greeted Jim. Jim and the grandfather sat on their front porch. The grandfather said to Jim that I know your family. If there's anything that I can do for you, always let me know. And the granddaughter brought Kool-Aid out to the two gentlemen. But if you notice, Jim Brown never left the front porch. The granddaughter told her grandfather that furniture needed to be moved, and Jim offered to help. And as they were approaching the entry door into the home, the gentleman turned to Jim and said, "Look, you know we don't let niggers in the house." And so that conversation in a very subtle way comes up again in the movie, but it was a learning situation for Jim Brown. As Muhammad Ali is concerned, or Cassius Clay, you all are familiar with his experiences in Louisville, Kentucky, where he had won the 1960s championship gold medal for boxing and was not treated very well once he got back home and ended up throwing his medal into the Ohio River. Moving forward, we are now back at the hotel after the fight. And as I mentioned, a party was looked for by some of the brothers, but there was no party to take place. Malcolm had a plan to let the brothers know that Muhammad Ali had decided to join the Nation of Islam. And the second part of his plan, which he had not revealed to Muhammad Ali, was that he was going to leave the nation and that he was hoping that Muhammad Ali, or Cassius Clay at the time, would follow him to his new organization. As I also mentioned, there was a tension between the Honorable Elijah Muhammad and Malcolm. But Malcolm, you can see by the movie, had already made a transition from the teachings of the Nation of Islam as they were taught by the Honorable Elijah Muhammad to Islam, to Sunni Islam, to Islam that is practiced all over the world. And part of that dialogue between Muhammad Ali and Malcolm comes up later in the program. And so there's quite a lot to be said about that. And I don't want to get too deep into it. I know people have a lot of comments they want to make and a lot of questions that they want to entertain. I want to go back to some dialogue between Malcolm and Sam Cooke. Malcolm, as you know, was very dedicated to the struggle of his people. And Malcolm did not feel that Sam Cooke in his music was addressing the needs and the struggles of his people. So in the movie, you will notice that Malcolm was very critical of Sam, and Sam took it as a negative at first until Malcolm told him that, you know, I've attended your concerts. I recognize the power of what you can do in your songs, and you're not doing it to help our people. And because I care for you, that's why I'm telling you what I'm telling you now. Sam eventually understood that, and it became more and more clear as he developed. And part of the conversation he had with Jim Brown just before Muhammad Ali's announcement, he asked Jim, do you know that I know what's going on out there? And Sam thought that Jim thought that Sam was referring to what was going on in what was about to happen with Muhammad Ali and Malcolm outside with the press. However, Sam was letting Jim know, I know what's going on in the world. And I've been working on some things because I know how important it is. There was also a conversation between Jim Brown and Malcolm. Now, Jim Brown represented a spirit of independence in the movie based on my observations. And I think he's represented that spirit throughout his career. So Jim was very concerned about Muhammad Ali. Now in the movie, it indicates that Jim did not know that Muhammad Ali was going to make an announcement regarding his position in the Nation of Islam. But according to Jim Brown's autobiography, Out of Bounds, Jim knew going to the hotel that Muhammad Ali was not going to follow Malcolm away from the Nation of Islam. But that didn't, that became clear in the movie, in the hotel room. But factually, Jim knew that going in. He and Muhammad Ali were very close. I also want to mention a conversation between Malcolm and Muhammad Ali. Once Muhammad Ali realized that Malcolm was leaving the nation, Muhammad Ali asked him, so are you going to leave the nation at the same time trying to get me to join the nation? And Malcolm told Muhammad, no. Well, Muhammad said to him, are you going to stop being a Muslim? And Muhammad said to him, no, I'm becoming more and more Muslim. And Muhammad Ali didn't understand that at the time, but Malcolm was going through what one of our brothers, his book, Malcolm X and Al-Islam, Mustafa El-Amin, calls the 3 phases of human development. The first phase being the physical phase. As you know, as I mentioned earlier, Malcolm had been a troubled person, as a youth, going from one foster home to another foster home. And he was living on the physical level of development. And once Malcolm was introduced to the teachings of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, his mind was turned on. And once his mind was turned on, he was entering the mental phase of his development. And then after that mental phase of development, Malcolm, with the help, and the movie does not stress this, and this is one of the things that's left out of history, Malcolm was taught and influenced by the Honorable Elijah Muhammad's son, Imam W.D. Muhammad, on Islam. So Malcolm was becoming more and more spiritually aware of what the true teachings of Islam was and is. And he was moving in that direction and was trying to get Muhammad Ali to come with him in that direction. If you were to read, I'm sure many of you have, the autobiography of Malcolm X, written by, what's the brother's name? I shouldn't forget that. Anybody want to tell me? Alex Haley. Alex Haley, in the book, Malcolm reveals that Imam W.D. Muhammad, the Honorable Elijah Muhammad's son, was the most spiritual person in that community. He also revealed that if anything had happened to the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, that W.D. Muhammad would be the person, or should be the person, to lead the community. So Malcolm was on a journey. Malcolm was, as you know, very sincere, very dedicated to what he believed in. And I haven't found anything in his history that suggests otherwise. So there's a lot to be said about that. And I'm sure some of you on the line who have history in the Nation of Islam will be able to talk a little bit about that. So as I mentioned, there was no party. There was simply a great deal of conversation between these men on different levels. And I want to take the remainder of the time with you all's permission, because I'm told there are a lot of questions about the movie. There's a lot of comments that people would like to make. Hopefully I've laid some groundwork for discussion. And once we conclude our discussion, then we'll close out with a prayer, a dua that was recited by our Imam Muhammad during a Jummah service in 2008 at our national convention in Detroit. So with that, anyone who is controlling the buttons, I'm ready to open the meeting for discussion.
Okay, everyone is able to unmute themselves. I think starting out, Brother Rod, there's a comment in the chat. I don't know if Sister Jamila wanted to voice that for those maybe who are not able to see it. Kind of begin from there.
Okay.
Okay, I don't mind. Assalamu alaikum.
Assalamu alaikum.
Yeah, I watched the movie with my 16-year-old daughter, and I grew up in the nation, but by the time we transitioned out of the nation, I was just 10. So she asked me, were we allowed to listen to music in the nation? And I could not remember. So that was just a question that someone who didn't have that experience from the nation watching the movie. And she also asked, did we make salat during the nation, and was it the same? Because of course, in the movie, they are saying some things out loud that, we don't say out loud. So those was the two questions. Did we listen to music? Did we practice salat?
Well, as far as music during the Nation of Islam, and there are others on the line who can speak to this as well, it was discouraged. In fact, boxing, Muhammad Ali's profession, was discouraged. However, that changed over time with Jabir Muhammad, Herbert Muhammad, peace be upon him, becoming Muhammad Ali's manager out of the Nation of Islam. And the rest of that is history. But in terms of prayer, during the Nation of Islam, we did not pray like that. And that is one hint in the movie when Malcolm and Muhammad, Cassius Clay at the time, performing prayer. That is a sign that Malcolm had made the transition from the teachings, not all of the teachings, but from the teachings of the Nation of Islam, if you will, to Islam. And the language you heard in the prayer that Malcolm and Muhammad, Cassius Clay was making is language that we recite today. However, that is not all of the prostration and some of the wording that you heard or that you saw in the film was not practiced in the Nation of Islam. And keep in mind, the Honorable Elijah Muhammad said to the community, my job is not to teach you this religion. My job is to clean you up, to prepare you for the religion. I hope I answered your question.
You did very well. Thank you.
I wanted to, Assalamu alaikum, Brother Rod. Thank you for that foundation. I wanted to get your take on, because we've had some conversation, offline around some of the perceptions folks could get from the way the movie was directed. There was a particular, and I think that Regina King did a good job in her direction, and I'm actually a big fan of hers. But there was a scene where there's a young brother who's like he's on security detail. He's outside the room. He comes in the room, and and he's asking for autographs, and a question is asked to him. After some conversation, basically equating the nation to a gang. Like, what was the difference between him joining the nation or joining a gang, right? And he brought up issues of he was talking about security, being safe and basically just living with dignity. But you recall the scene that I'm referring to?
I do.
Yeah. Could you? What was your take on that?
Well, the young brother's name was Jamal, and he was a big fan of Jim Brown and was born and raised in Toledo, Ohio, I believe. It may have been Cincinnati, but I think it was Toledo, Ohio. And the conversation was going on between Jim Brown, Jamal, and Cassius Clay. So Cassius Clay asked Jamal a question about the nation. Was he glad that he had joined the nation? And Jamal's reply was, yes, I am. I wish I had joined sooner. And Jamal went on to say that joining the nation prevented him from being a purse thief. And Jim Brown said to Jamal, well, you can, let me back up a second. It prevented him from being a purse thief, and it also prevented people from jumping on him. And Jim Brown said to Jamal, well, you can join a gang if protection is what you're looking for. And in that scene, Jamal said he had joined the nation, but the question Jim Brown asked is, well, what's the difference? If you need protection, you could have just joined the gang. Why you need to join the nation for protection? And so my take on it, and others may have a different take on it. I think that was a part of that response was very positive, but it could leave you with a perception that these are a group of people who are united together, but at the same time, not as organized and not as disciplined as they should be. And I was a little bit concerned about that. And I'd like to get other people's take on it as well.
I would add something. Having had that same experience, that wasn't the general perception. This movie, of course, as you mentioned, was fiction. So they took some liberties, I guess, for their own purposes and objectives. But the average believer, member of the Nation of Islam, didn't compare with a gang. Matter of fact, they were coming from gangs. They were converted from gangs. But I thought that was maybe just some liberties that the writer took. So there's some criticism, yeah, but overall, I thought the dialogue was rich, and the subject matter of the discussion between the four was very rich and really reflected the various psychological states that we had as a people at the time. But yeah, I think that was not an accurate portrayal of the average member of the Nation of Islam. The average member of the Nation of Islam embraced Islam to the degree that they sacrificed everything. And they saw it as really as an answer. Because many of the members of the Nation of Islam, I think those who remember know that many came from the prisons. So obviously they were seeing it as a refuge from that life, not as a comparison to it. So I thought it was maybe an unjust comparison.
I agree. Mm-hmm. And I agree that the movie was well done. That we can't expect people who didn't have this experience to have the same perception or the same reverence for it that we would have. But overall, it was as you mentioned, the dialogue was excellent, and it brought out issues that were current then and relevant now.
I think speaking of current then and relevant now, I think I would love to hear your take and other folks' take on kind of this ongoing tension of using your platform for your people, right? That was one of the premises of the film. It's like you've got this beautiful platform that you can move us forward, and you're not using it. And even last night, I just watched a Grownish. And that was the talk. There's two teenage runners on there who are, they got scholarships, and another teenage at the college who's pushing them to use their platform, to push the agenda. What are your thoughts about that, and that being kind of a continuous conversation in the community?
Well, remember when Honorable Elijah Muhammad started teaching, this was in the 1930s. This was during the period of the Great Depression, where the situation of African Americans, I would say it was much worse then than it is now. But if you come through the 30s, the 40s, the 50s, on through the 60s, and recall that this scene took place in 1964. During the height of the civil rights movement, and Malcolm, given his development and his experiences, was very dedicated to that fight. Not that others weren't. All four of those men were dedicated to uplifting the plight of African-American people, but they took different approaches to it. And if you recall in the movie, when Malcolm was on Sam Cooke for not using his platform, he was essentially told by Muhammad Ali, Cassius Clay, I keep forgetting that, and Jim Brown to ease up. And then, if you recall, Sam went into the success that he was having economically. And most of you know that Jim Brown, throughout his football career, was promoting African-American unity and the use of our economic power. So I think it's still relevant that we use our platform when we have one to address the issues that affect our people. And I think that will be our situation until we feel that we are fully accepted as human beings in this society. we may go about it different ways given the technology and the situation we're in currently. But I am one, depending upon what method you choose to use, I'm one to believe you should use your platform. But I'm also one who believes that it is not up to others to tell you how to use that platform. But if you're advancing our cause, then I'm one to promote that.
Brother Rod, this is Taisha. Assalamu
alaikum.
I thought that they were, like everyone had a different perspective on what their belief system was. And I think Malcolm wasn't trying to get everyone to come over to the nation. He was just trying to get them to be able to use the platform that where they were at to be able to educate African-American people and to get them to see, how they could come together and become a stronger force than just, one, just coming from the Nation of Islam, or coming from sports, or coming from music. I think that's what that's what I got from the movie, that he was trying to do, to get them to be able to. And I think Sam Cooke was saying to him that, he had already had some, an idea on how to be able to use his platform. And then later on, they showed how he came up with this song, in reference to empowering African-American people.
Absolutely. All of them had their different approaches. And I agree that Malcolm was not trying to get all of them to join the nation or to follow him, but he wanted, as you mentioned, each person in that group, and that's a very powerful group. These four gentlemen are very powerful in their own respects, but as you mentioned, he wanted them to use their platform and their ability to communicate with our people, to educate and use our power, whether that power was the power of song or the power of our economic development, economic life, whatever it was, he wanted us to use it. But he thought that those four were in a unique position. We could talk about Jim Brown for quite some time, just his period of engagement. And, not to mention Muhammad Ali and the contributions he made. But I agree with that assessment.
So I really do feel like it is, sometimes I like that you said we have to, figure out what way. Nobody should be able to tell us how to use it. I think that's where the real problem comes in. When not that we don't use it, but that it's not in alignment with how someone else thinks you should use it. And that's kind of the way I was feeling that Malcolm X was coming off in that movie. And I see that problem still today, where if you're not using it the way that somebody else thinks that you're using it, then you're not down for the cause. And the more that we don't see how we can skin a cat, for lack of better words, more than one way, I think it limits us and it disempowers us as well.
I agree with that. All of us do this. We're looking at that situation between those four gentlemen through the lens of 2021. And I think it would be helpful if we, as much as we can, to look at it through the lens of 1960, 1961, 1962, 1965. The issues were quite different. We didn't have a Voting Rights Act at the time. They stayed at the Fontainebleau because they could not stay at other hotels. They were still using the Green Book at the time. There was, as you know, quite a bit of oppression. So I try to look at it in the time frame that they were in. Our time is different, but nevertheless, we still have to do the best we can with what we have.
So we've got two hands, Brother Harrison, and then myself. And I'm going to be looking to see if anybody else, if there are other hands up, we want to make sure that we get those comments in. See Brother Quiet as well. So Brother Harrison.
Okay. Greetings, everyone. The movie was
at Harrison Ford out of Minneapolis, Minnesota.
Yes, out of the frozen tundra. That movie was only 114 minutes long. It should have been a miniseries because of all the things that were impacted in it. That piece that we were discussing about the gentleman who was doing the security, who was saying that the Nation of Islam was like a gang. I bet that's about a 2 days in a miniseries that could have been impacted from that conversation. It was a lot of things in that movie that I thought was left out that played an important part. I don't know too many Black women that would put up with what Malcolm's wife was going through at the time when they're bombing the house, the phone calls, the babies, and all those things that were going on while he was finding his way through Mecca. Then there's the part of the four men when they had the discussion about the light-skinned Blacks and the dark-skinned Blacks. That was another piece I thought should have been expanded on. And the fact that each one had a different path to sharing their beliefs and how they were trying to help their communities. I mean, that in itself was just the fact that they were all together in one spot and somebody didn't take a chance to try to kill them. We look at Colin Kaepernick today, a light-skinned brother who now is out of the NFL because of his stance against brutality on Black people. So, I mean, what they were talking about 60 years ago, still going on today. So, I mean, I don't know how much we've come from the light skin and the black-skinned Black, or how far we came from just making the recognition of our Black women. And I think that was a big part left out of this movie.
I agree with you, Harrison. It could have been a miniseries, but, it was just one night in Miami. They left quite a bit. I didn't even touch on, Sister Betty and Minister Farrakhan's role in all of this. There's quite a bit that just couldn't be discussed, and I regret that we weren't able to.
So what I would, I'll make a quick observation and comment. Taking that example of that dynamic and then kind of overlaying it onto today, the context of today, and how, we're still fighting the same battle, still marching, still agitating for, equality and human dignity. The perception of division, right? It serves those who seek to keep us divided. That conversation between these four giants, it served a few different purposes. One, it was showing that there's a need to communicate, first and foremost. And second, and it's been said earlier, there can be different methodologies, employed to reach the same goal. And I guess third is that you realize that for as articulate and for as sincere and driven as each one of these individuals were, in particular Malcolm X, just to kind of focus on him, you could see that there was an educative process that was going on as Sam Cooke was talking about how he was a part of the fight, how he was empowering Black musicians, in an industry that has been, historically exploitative and continues to be so. But then also at the same time, as Mr. Soul, his outreach, it was not just Black empowerment, but it was also about trying to reach the souls of, and he said they got a soul, then they worth talking to, right? They worth saving, right? So that was the way that he went about using his platform and his craft for the development or for the uplift of Black folks, but also as a way to try to address that spiritual disease, of white supremacy, that so many white folks are unconsciously, carried. So it was quite a bit. So I think for us today, it's a matter of us having having occasions where we can communicate and understand the ways that other people are approaching, this shared struggle.
Very good. I agree. I don't want to leave this Zoom meeting though without because there are individuals on the line who may not be as familiar with the Nation of Islam as many of us are, and Malcolm's role in the Nation of Islam. I do want to say that Malcolm went where you see many Muslims are now. He just went there long before many others did. And if you will recall, when he talked about going to Mecca in the movie, that was symbolic of his spiritual journey. And 10 years after his assassination, the Nation of Islam, because Malcolm came to realize that there were Muslims of all stripes, of all races, nationalities, etc. In 1975, about 10 years after Malcolm's assassination, the Nation of Islam, under the leadership of Imam Muhammad, opened its doors to all people and embarked on the path of true Islam, following the life of that was established by the Prophet, prayers and peace be on him.
Alhamdulillah. Brother Clyde, you had your hand up?
Yeah, I did. And I'm not going to repeat things that have been said that were on my mind to say because a lot of those things have been said. But where I think I can maybe say something that brings a little bit of perspective, this has partially been said too. What I appreciated, although I knew it before I saw the movie, what I appreciated was the value of really appreciating the different ways you fight in different arenas. And that we have to do two things. One, we have to recognize that there are those different ways and respect people who are fighting in those arenas. But we also have to respect the fact that they probably know something about those arenas that we don't know. So we can't really dictate to them how they fight when we don't necessarily know what they're up against. Brother Harrison mentioned that obviously this could have been a miniseries, but I think some of these movies are just giving us our assignments. Our assignment is way beyond recognizing what needs to be done. It's telling us, so now that's our assignment. But one of the things you can do is, I felt a special connection to Sam Cooke because, and I think those of you who are from the South realize this, Sam Cooke was really, really, really huge in the South. Yeah. Sam Cooke had made the decision to take on the music industry because he had recognized, first of all, the tremendous wealth that was being taken from us through our culture. And he was trying to harness that wealth into a business. In fact, if he had been successful, the first Motown would have been in Chicago rather than Detroit.
That's right.
Set
him up. That's right.
And I'm from Detroit. That's not easy for me to say. but this is simply the truth. And if you just go to Prime and put Sam Cooke's name in, you'll see several movies. One of them, I think, is the 3 Killings of Sam Cooke or something like that.
That's right.
Where they really tell that story very well of how he had peeped the industry and he was really understanding intellectual property. And what many people don't know is even after he left the gospel arena as a performer, he worked very hard to make sure those people still had income, even employing some of them, in some of his enterprises that were on the so-called secular side. So, he's really a giant that's really understated. And I really, really appreciated Spike Lee having that song play Change Is Gonna Come in that movie, in the soundtrack of that movie, which told me that Spike kind of knew the story too.
Right. That's right. That's right. MashaAllah.
Assalamu alaikum.
Assalamu alaikum.
I want to touch on the fact that Malcolm talked to Cooke and he talked to Jim Brown about they're using their platform. And I think that was very important because growing up in the South, we grew up in Chattanooga, Tennessee, that we didn't start to know about the Nation of Islam and the teachers of Islam until we were in our, actually grown, until we were in high school and leaving the city. And so I think it's very important that even today's time that the people who have those platforms and who can use those platforms to reach the people in the South, because it's just not enough information. We have been misinformed for years. Can you touch on that, Brother Rod?
Yeah, I agree. Given the only two on the line from Chattanooga, Tennessee. That's my friend Melvin McCamey. He and I grew up together playing Little League Baseball. I was a pitcher, he was a catcher. Thank you. We call him Stumpy, by the way. Thank you, Stumpy, for mentioning that.
How you doing, brother?
There was you're absolutely correct in your observation that we did not become aware in the South, at least in the part of the South that we were in, until I think I was probably 15. And at that time, I was traveling back and forth between Tennessee and Illinois, Chattanooga and Chicago. But once we did become familiar with the teachings of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, and I'll tell this story, Stumpy, because by that time I had read the autobiography of Malcolm X. And I remember I had moved to Chicago, but remember coming back and I told you that I had a book for you that I wanted you to read. And you recall what that book was?
It was about the teachings of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad.
And the other one was a dictionary.
Yes. I remember that.
Wow.
Yeah, growing up in the South, we just, I was fortunate to have a Black history class, and I learned a lot about it. And I had to do some study work. And once I started to read about these different things, I became interested and started to even reach out and try to learn much as I can. But a lot of my neighbors, people in my surroundings, my classmates, they didn't have any kind of way to be educated about Islam. And it's important, even though I'm not a Muslim myself, but it's very important that we use the platform we have to teach about these things, because it's part of our history. It's a great part of our history.
That's right. That's right. Cooke King said. Mm-hmm. That's right. Mm-hmm. MashaAllah.
I think it's worth interjecting, especially for those who haven't read the chat. I just want to read this comment from Sister Jamila. Another thing I love was highlighting of 4 strong Black men who loved and supported each other. We don't get to see these positive friendships on screen. Nothing else need to be added to that.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, Brother Imam. So we've come to the end of our program. And so if there are no other questions, we got about 2 minutes. If there's another question, comment, then we can entertain that, and then we need to close out.
I'd like to make a brief comment.
Yes, sir.
Like Brother Melvin was saying about, we were up in age, maybe young, late teenagers, early 20s, maybe, when we really had our generation had this endeavor with the Nation of Islam, encounter with the Nation of Islam. And it brought back to memory of I was several blocks from my house where I was told Muhammad Ali was down there teaching at the bowling alley. So I went down there and there he was. And that was really my first introduction to the teaching of the Nation of Islam and the spirit of the Nation of Islam. But what really stands out about that, in contrast with the movie, it appears that he was very dependent on Malcolm. I think the history is that Malcolm was the first minister he heard and inspired him. But Muhammad Ali had his own enthusiasm about it. He wasn't that dependent on Malcolm as I think some histories may portray. He became an independent, powerful thinker himself. And at that time, he was announcing his name, Cassius Clay. I remember it just like I'm looking at it, listening to it on the tape. He said, clay is soil with no ingredients.
Wow.
My name is Muhammad Ali. That's a walk. Maybe I didn't have a car. So that's how young I was. But this was how the enthusiasm that was in, it was not just, it was in the neighborhood because people were our age were joining the Nation of Islam.
Yeah, that's somehow that worked out.
And I can say a lot more about that.
be said. You and I, Rabani, shared experience. In 1996, I had a chance to meet Muhammad Ali at Masjid Al-Rahman, where he came there to autograph some literature for the community. And I happened to be standing as quasi-security for him. And as I stood behind him, he motioned to me with his index finger to come closer. And I did, and I leaned down. And he said to me, "I'm just another nigga." And that spoke volumes to me with all those people outside waiting just to get his signature. So there's quite a bit of history here, I think, and I'll let you all be the judge of the program today. But hopefully we've added, all of us, some benefit to our knowledge base. And with that, Brother Imam, if you don't have any objections, we'll close out.
A quick 30-second informational. This and all of our other Taqwa Talks, Taleems, Jumas, these are all available for viewing and sharing on our YouTube channel. So please do visit, subscribe, and share. You'll find us at Masjid Al-Taqwa. It is in the chat. And with that, I'm going to turn it back over to you, Brother Rod, to close out. Thank you so much.
And I want to encourage all of you to study the words of Imam W.D. Muhammad. He is the hidden force behind a lot of this that you will probably not hear about, particularly his influence on Muhammad Ali, on Malcolm, and the Nation of Islam's influence on Jim Brown. There's a lot to be said there, but study the knowledge base of Imam Muhammad, and there's quite a bit there to learn. So with that, I'm going to close out, as I indicated, with a dua, a prayer that Imam Muhammad made at the 2008 National Convention. And if you all can join me, we'll close out.
Okay, let's do that.
With Allah's name, the merciful benefactor, the merciful redeemer. O Allah, I cannot manage this life myself without you. Please make of my life what you want it to be, what you prefer it to be. Do not allow me to act on my own. Help me to act in obedience to you, O Allah. We hear and we obey. Forgive us. We're asking for your forgiveness. Ameen. Assalamu alaikum. Peace.
Wa alaikum assalam.
Wa alaikum assalam.
Thank you, Brother Rod.